literally took 10 years professionally, but 15 years amateur and professional of failure to finally get to that point where I could actually start to succeed because I failed so many times. I got to get out of here. And I just had to leap. I just took a leap and said, these people are doing what I want to learn. And I just did it. I went through such an incredible failure and I had such an ego death at such an early age. So my ego death happened around 24, 25, and it stripped the whole life out of me. Then these ideas, some of them would stalk me. They'd stalk me at night. They'd stalk me in the shower. They'd stalk me when you're driving. Yeah, I can make a ton of money. And I walked away from 9 figures. I just walked away. I said, forget it. Enough's enough. It's taken a toll on my health. I've only taken one job in my life. All the other ones I created. What's your exit strategy for your life?
We have brand new room positioning, thanks to David Game. So once again, we have to thank him. But Tony, I think many of you in the room may know. However, a lot of the technology we now use, you have personally touched and have created.
Are you blaming me?
I'm not blaming you at all.
Okay.
I'm so grateful. I am so grateful for you being able to do that. And we were just speaking. We just came out of the session with David Guillaume speaking about manifesting, but you have been doing this for decades in terms of creating and realizing technology that has empowered us to really live lives on a whole different level. Could you please walk us through how did you first get into understanding bringing technology into this realm? When did your first experience come? Was it at Philips?
Oh, so look, I've had technology in my blood ever since I was a little kid. And I was just making things, and I started making things, and I started making things that I just wanted, and I just kept making and making things, whether it was a birdhouse or fixing soapbox derby race or whatever it was. And so I had an environment around me to do that, and that was my grandfather, and then other people along the way. And so having startups in high school or whatever, it just all flowed naturally. But there was a point in my life when I hit a wall. And this was pre-internet, people. This is when the fax machine had just started. Not when it's over. It's fax machine. And there was no internet. And I was literally trying to consume as much as I possibly could. But the industry was changing so rapidly back then that the only way you could actually learn was either you read in some cases a weekly magazine, but it was a monthly magazine, and that would be all the information you could get because I was in the middle of Michigan in Detroit, and everything was happening in Silicon Valley. So I was just like, I was starved for knowledge. And at some point, I said, I'm like the big fish in this tiny little puddle. And I was like, I got to get out of here. And I just had to leap. I just took a leap and said, these people are doing what what I want to learn. And I just did it. And it was literally just inside me. I didn't know what I was doing, where I was going. Everything in my life has been, I just wanted that thing to happen, and it was in service of a problem, solving a problem. It was not about, oh, I'm going to get to Silicon Valley because that's where the VC culture is and that's where I can raise money. It was just, I wanted to solve a problem. And who are the best people who could help me solve that problem? And that's how my whole life has been. And that was and I would take those leaps just because I wanted to solve that problem. And was it the right problem? Not always. A lot of times it wasn't. But it was something inside that told me I needed to do that. And I would throw everything away and just go after it. And I would chase things. I would chase so many things because I wanted that and I wanted that and I wanted to fix that and build that. And I just kept chasing things. And then over time you keep failing and failing and failing. And you're like, wait a second, what is it? Well, I don't have the right environment around me. I don't have the right people I'm learning from. I don't have the right access to the technology. I don't have, and so I learned through just literally falling over and falling over and falling over. But I never let that boundless hope or passion, you know, subside. It just kept getting stronger because as I started learning, I was like, wait a second. Oh, I'll try this. And then when I fail, I just believe I'll go figure it out again. I'll learn from that thing and then figure out the next failure point. And it literally took 10 years professionally, but 15 years amateur and professional of failure to finally get to that point where I could actually start to succeed because I failed so many times. And I think about this a lot as like, you have to have the right environment when you're failing because it's really a learning experience. And if you think about, learning to walk, right? You fail as a little kid to learn to walk 1,000 times. If every time you tried something, like took that first step to try to walk, because you see everybody walking, I'm going to walk, and you failed, and you had an environment around you said, you'll never walk. You're not going to walk, right? So, but no, you have an incredible family and community around you. You're like, oh, good work. You just kind of stood up a little bit. And you do that 1,000 times. And before you know, you're walking, everyone's like cheering, woo, but you failed 1,000 times doing it. And if we keep that energy and that spirit around the things that we do, when we have the right people around us to do that, then we can eventually get there. But a lot of times, what we grow up with, and I'm sorry if I'm long-winded here, but a lot of times what we grow up with, or not, we almost all grow up with, is the educational system, the system, right? We have our community around us and we learn to walk, we learn to talk that way, we learn a lot of things. But when it comes to learning, we got to really learn language or we got to learn math or something like that, we go into this system and the system says, failure is bad. You better get the A. If you don't get the A, you're out. Your life is over with, right? But if you fail, if you get the A, you can go on to the next step and the next step. And you get these people, and now AI is going to change that, but you get all these people who come out of these systems and they got the A's and they did everything perfect, but they don't have a sense of who they are because the system made them that. And then there's a bunch of people who failed who said, I'm never going to be able to amount to anything because that's what the system told them. And so because here's another aspect. I went to 12 schools in 15 years growing up. I went to 12 schools in 15 years. So I just kept changing. So the system that I lived in was only around for every 2 years. Yes, of course, there were similarities, but I didn't believe this person or that person or this person. Like the nuns because I went to Catholic school a few years, the nuns said, this kid is the worst. He'll never amount to anything. These were the nuns, right? And so I just kind of gave up on the system. I actually gave up on all the people around me because I was always the new kid. So I just sat there and built stuff and I didn't worry what everybody else talked to because they didn't have the environment around me because I was always a new kid. So I just did my stuff in my vacuum and found other geeks, and just that's how we did it. So to me, I kept, when I started was I just had that, I made that environment around me. It's happened around second or third grade because we had moved so many times. I kind of gave up on the system and gave up on trying to get friends around me. So I didn't have those kinds of influences. It was pretty lonely, of course, but at the same time was able to create my own world. And then ultimately, when I had created the world as much as I possibly could. Then I said, I got to get to Silicon Valley and make that leap of faith and just go, okay. And now was this tiny little fish in this huge pond working for the creators of the original Macintosh. And that's when it all went. That's when it all started. But then I had 10 more years of failure after that.
There's so many things and pathways we can go here. The thing that I'm really curious about, as you said, is the importance of surrounding yourself with the community that even when they see you fail, they still encourage you to get back up and to keep trying. Who are those people for you, whether it be in Silicon Valley or in your life, as you're going on your journey of really, becoming a master of, let's say, engineering or creating product? Who are those people for you that really supported you on that journey of failure?
Well, I've had various mentors and along the way. Um, and they sought them out, but they were also seeking someone like me out. There were people out there, and now I'm on that side of it, where I look for great people to work with because I want to help them. Most of us who are successful in this room, I'm pretty sure you can say this person somewhere along their career or somewhere along their life gave them the leg up. They said, I'm going to take a bet on you, right? And you get to that point, I'm like I said, I was talking about fax machine. It wasn't even existing when I was starting. You get to that point in life when you're like, oh, wait a second. And it flips from, oh, I'm going to ask for someone to be my mentor to, oh, I think I'm a mentor now. And you gotta understand that flip in life. You gotta understand when it comes time that you are the mentor and you're going to help the next generation because I'm only sitting here because a lot of amazing people helped me and took a bet on me. They were It wasn't a transaction, it was a relationship. They wanted, like, I believe in this kid. I think I remember being like that kid and I needed someone to give me that leg up. And so, my whole world has flipped from being the leader, and leading teams and doing the things I want to do to taking other people's missions and helping them on their mission and seeing how I can help them to not have to fail as many times as I did and kind of get to the head of that success line as fast as possible because I only pick people that are really doing missions that really matter. They're not, whatever matters to you. But for me, there's things that really matter to me: societal issues, environmental issues, health issues, those kinds of things.
Was there a specific person that you remember made you have a mental leap that just went, whoa, you just blew my
Well,
mind?
my grandfather first. My grandfather took me under his wing when I was 3, and he was like, "Okay, here's an electrical socket. Here's how you change it. Here's how you paint a wall. Here's how you build this. Here's how you use a power tool." This was before computers again. And so, my mom, my grandmother was like, "What the hell are you doing giving a 3-year-old power tools?" But still, it was like, no, he's gonna figure it out. Like, you got to also be able to give people and put risk in their way, and that's the beautiful thing about it being a parent or being a mentor is you have to know how much risk you can give someone without too much risk, but that's how they grow, right? Because it's risk of failure. So it's how many people in here are parents? How many? You? Yeah, you guys know you have to figure out you parent of yourself, Sammy.
He's manifesting.
You have to know what the right amount of risk is that to give a kid because that's how they grow. What's the difference between a parent and a babysitter, right? It's risk. Babysitters are do no harm. Take the kid away from, have some fun with them and give them back. It's not about growth. It's not about taking through risk. Like if they do something, no, that's bad. A parent, you have to, if you always insulate them, if you're a helicopter parent, you do everything for them, that's not good either. You have to let them risk and they have to learn through life experiences and you're there to be a backstop with them to support them, right? And so my grandfather was like that. He would put risk in my way and help me to learn and learn really fast. So he empowered me. He's like, see all these things around the world? Humans built these things. You're a human. You can build and repair and fix all this stuff because everything we see around us that's, structural was made by humans. It didn't just pop up. Obviously, we didn't build the nature. We're trying to emulate nature now, but we're nowhere near of that. But everything in the built world is humans. And so take that leap. And so giving that empowerment to me was the first one. And then it was a series, whether it was Bill Campbell or other people who gave me these incredible life lessons about human nature, more so human nature than it was about specific individual industry experts or this or whatever. It was human nature. And that was really important because my grandfather gave me the empowerment and showed me how humans affected the world, but then also how through being a human and connecting with others that you can then help to change and grow teams yourself as well as teams of people.
I'm curious about also, there's a lot of founders in this room and creators of products. You've created probably one of the most legendary products that we've all interacted with, whether it be the first iPod or the iPhone. These people, these products, when I remember when I first saw and touched my first iPod or the iPhone, I was like, whoa, this is going to change my world. And you've been, not only have you been part of these products, but you've been part of these legendary teams that have created these products. So, for a lot of the founders and product creators in this room, what are the most important takeaways that you had on those journeys when you're part of these teams and creating these products that really change society and humanity?
Well, first, I was highly tempered because I had 10 years of failure. So when I first came to Silicon Valley, I went to work for this company called General Magic. This was the original Mac team who set out to make the iPhone 15 years too early. So there's a movie about it actually called General Magic, the movie. And we were literally building an iPhone 15 years too early. The internet hadn't existed. We were doing e-tailing before it actually became a thing 15 years later. We were doing emojis. We were literally the fundamental of most of the things that you see in an iPhone today were done at General Magic or any smartphones. We did it at General Magic. And we were told by the press and everybody, and I'm 21, 22, 23, we're going to take over the world. We're going to be the next Microsoft. It's going to be the best thing. Da, 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 da. So me being 21, I'm like, yeah, if you watch the movie, you won't even recognize me because I was very, very unhealthy back then because that's all I did was work.
You look better now.
Yeah, just slightly. But literally, I went through such an incredible failure and I had such an ego death at such an early age. So my ego death happened around 24, 25, and it stripped the whole life out of me. Like literally, I had to reboot myself. And so when you go through these groundbreaking products that are going to change the world, the first thing that I did, outside of the little things I did, but the big thing was the biggest failure on the planet at the time was we launched it just before the internet happened. And it was somewhere around $800 million was evaporated in 1993, 94. 800 million. Okay.
Lynn?
Yeah, now, yes, yeah, of course. But just think about it. So if you at that age you go through this, your expectations were this high, and you go through such a failure, you're like, I'm tempered. I've heard it all, right? So the next, my next 8 years, kind of 6, 7 years, was all about more failures, but not on as grand a scale. And then when the iPod came, when I did the iPod, um, everyone's like, "Oh, this is going to be groundbreaking. You're going to change everything." I'm like, "Yeah." You get a little temper. And the big thing is that's what you need for that attitude is just keep your head down, keep working at it. Because the iPod, actually, most people don't know this is, and most people don't even know what an iPod is now. But the first two generations were a failure, a business failure. Nobody remembers that. It was a business failure. We sold like 250,000 of them or something to the Mac aficionados because there was only a few Mac aficionados at the time. There was no Apple retail stores. There was no Apple services. You could hardly buy a Mac anywhere. No one even carried Macs. Had less than a 1% market share in the US when the iPod shipped. So we were shipping it just to the iPod or to the Apple owners. And so it was a huge failure for the first 2 years. I'm like, keep your head down, keep trying, let's keep going, people. And the third generation is when we finally nailed it and everything changed. But we had to, if we thought we were going to have a success, it was just forget it. Just keep your head down and stay focused.
And one of the things that we chatted with you before is obviously the whole summit is around the theme of redefining success. And here you are, going from a lot of failure, General Magic being one of them, huge failure. Then, as you said, even the first generations of iPod being okay, so. But then, mega success, right? Apple just starts taking over the world. It's still to this day one of the largest companies in the world. You're part of the foundations of that company. However, the question I actually want to ask is more about you're part of this rocket ship that's climbing. You decide, I want to get out. So, what made you want to leave a rocket ship that is going like, everyone's like, why would you want to get out? This is like the greatest thing ever. So, what was it in your decision making to want to leave Apple and then go on this whole new journey into the unknown and rebuilding from scratch?
Because I never really had an identity from a group when I was a kid, I was able to much more easily walk away because I knew I had the tools to create something else. Because in my life, I've only taken one job in my life. All the other ones I created. And so there's a different mentality when you go, oh, I can create what it is I want to create. I didn't know I was going to create Nest after Apple. I was just like, I just can't live in this environment any longer because I had done 18 generations of the iPod, and it's like it was a treadmill, duh, 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 right? And then the iPhone, it was the third generation. I'm like, I've seen this movie, right? Way too many times. I'm like, I'm done. Right. So it was really like, and then it was getting political and there's so many people and it was just not fun anymore. I was like, this is not fun. This is not serving me. Yeah, I can make a ton of money. And I walked away from 9 figures. I just walked away. I said, forget it. Enough's enough. My health is taking it's taking a toll on my health.
What led you to such a decision? Because for many, whether it be founders in this room who have businesses that are doing really well, but oftentimes we get stuck in our own success. We feel
Yeah.
like, well, like I have, especially if you have employees, you raise a lot of money, it's not fun, but you're like, well, like I have to be here. Or you, as you said, there's a certain identity. I have these many employees, I'm this title. What made you, was it really just your childhood and that ability to be able to always adapt and not care about where you're stepping into?
But I'm always been driven by emotion and energy more so than the rational things.
Mm.
So I just go by the emotion side. I'm like, this isn't serving me. This isn't right. I'm just going to go find something else. And I had done enough failures, right? And even though it was success, after all these other failures, you're like, oh, you're on a success. You're like, no, no, no. This is going to be a failure for me. I did what had to do. I'm always the tip of the spear. I'm not the maintainer. I'm the tip of the spear kind of guy. So I always want to go, and emotionally, that's what's engaging for me. And that's when, we talked about this, about what you do, right? You were like, oh, it was passion, it was energy. I could do all this creative things. And then I hired all these people around me and they gave me all this data. And I started being, you know, your creativity was run by the system as opposed to how you feel about it, right? And so I was like, and I think you are doing the same thing, which is I got to get out of this system and get back to who I am to do what it is I do, right? And so I think that's really important is remember that some people can in certain phases are really good at that and other people are great at other phases, but they don't necessarily do both.
So for yourself, after you left Apple, um, did you really not know about Nest, and you're gonna you're gonna start another company? What was your thoughts leaving Apple? It's just like, okay, I'm just going into the unknown.
Yeah, I went around the road trip for a year and a half.
And in that time, were you? How did you feel about this identity of
Believe
Apple?
me, it wasn't easy. Growth is hard, as we know. So it was like a year, it was a year and a half of going, not that I was regretting leaving, but what happened and how it all went down. It was like, how could that have happened? And there was a lot of soul searching, and understanding what really mattered and who mattered. And so for me, it was difficult because you're watching the team and the success happen, and you're off on the sidelines, and you put yourself on the sidelines. Um, and so it was definitely a like there I had to go through some catharsis. And that was great that I went around the world and I didn't get distracted. A lot of people, what they do is when they leave something, they have to jump to another lily pad right away. And I've learned that is not the way to do it. The only way you really learn is by taking a break, getting bored, processing all of those things, and then moving on to the next thing. And so that's happened countless times in my life now. Is that I've always learned, and when I have CEOs of some of the startups that I invested in or whatever, and they're ready to leave, or I'm like, go away, take 6 months, 9 months. Don't pick up the phone. Do not answer those emails. Everyone's going to be chasing you. Get bored and learn from this experience, and then go figure out what you want to do. Because too many people, like, as soon as I left Apple, Samsung, can you come over and run our, smartphones at Samsung? I'm like, no, I don't want to go do that again, right? But you have to like get clear with yourself so you can make the next version of yourself. I say I just got through rebooting version 4.0 of myself. So I've gone through literally huge, huge changes 3 times now. Deep, deep catharsis to be able to get to the next the next chapter in a way.
Well, you said you did 15 generations of the iPod, so there's
18.
18. So okay, so you have 14 more generations of Tony Fadell.
Just was at that longevity seminar. So here we go.
So we have, but on that point of really rebooting, regenerating, recreating yourself, because I think it's a very important point that you were able to walk away from potential 9 figures to 10 figures at Apple to then be able to, beyond the money, I think to be able to hit success multiple times is quite rare. Because I remember even with my first business, I was like, maybe that's it. Maybe I'm just a one-hit pony, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
So and be able to go outside of this big behemoth corporation to go out on your own and then be able to create a business that's also a multi-billion-dollar exit. Once you took that break, you considered, hey, how did that next journey really begin for you, where you're like, okay, this is it, this is something I want to dedicate my life at least for the next decade?
Well, yeah, I had learned that, and I said earlier that I kept chasing all these different ideas. I had an idea, I want to fix that, I want to fix that. And I would chase these things. They were not necessarily, most of them weren't good, but it was something inside me. So I learned over time, especially with the failures also after at General Magic and ever, I had so many ideas that I ran away from the ideas. I literally ran away from the ideas. I would go, that's a great idea. Nah, put it aside. But then these ideas, some of them would stalk me. They'd stalk me at night. They'd stalk me in the shower. They'd stalk me when you're driving. You're just like, oh, that's pretty good. And then you're like, oh, I can't do it because of this. And I'd walk away. And then it would be like, oh, you could do this way and solve that problem. I'm like, oh, shit. And then, and Nest was one of those things that took 10 years. It's a problem that started 10 years earlier. And I kept trying to solve it year after year. And I kept walking away. And then ultimately, I'm like, I know how to build this. I know exactly what to do, and nobody's still doing it. And so, and I was like, and then during that year and a half, well, really the last half of the year, the half year of the year and a half, because I was starting to get bored of all this travel. I was like, oh, and the problem was arising because Nest, if you don't know, it was the first consumer product with AI in it in 2009, 2010, 11. And it was a thermostat that would help save energy. And we put AI in it, and it saved most people, between 30 and 40%, 50% money. And the thermostat was a problem that I had for 10 years. And then when I was going around the world, living around the world in all these houses, I was like, wait a second. Everybody in every part of the world has a thermostat and they all fucking suck. And you're like, wait a second. Ding, 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 ding. I'm like, and I know how to solve it. And then that's kind of what happened. And I was like, and then I just kept running away from the idea. And then, and then I was like, oh, I can solve it that way. And I can solve it that way. And then I'm like, no one's going to give me money for a thermostat. I go on a bike ride and I had $30 million at the end of the bike ride. So it's like, I was like, oh, it was just like, it would just fell into my lap. I'm like, I can't not do this. It was that kind of a thing.
Have you read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think she speaks about that. I'm curious at this point because, in the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, she speaks about how ideas will kind of come from the ether, and they'll pick a subject that they want this idea to be born out of. And I guess the idea heaven was like, Tony's really good. That's why all these ideas started coming to you. You become this vessel for ideas to be able to, who want to manifest. Like, I want Tony to be my parent. So, so how did?
And I had a lot of people saying this is the worst idea ever.
When I created the 5-minute journal with you, Jay, who's here, all my friends were like, "This is so dumb. Like, you'll never sell 10 copies."
So, amazing, huh? That's like you'll never walk. You're gonna fail.
So, but in terms of this whole, I'm sure a lot of people in the room also have tons of ideas. That's what makes founders. However, it's really about, as you said, connecting with the idea that you want to choose and to be able to bring into the world, and then be able to actually bring it all to life. So, talk us through that stage of actually bringing this idea that you chose into life, in terms of, and how everything just kind of came after it.
Well, just It was literally most the other thing that I used to do was you would get this idea and then you would jump on it right away and then you put all your resources into it. I'm going for it. I let it chase me and then it stalked me enough that I said, okay. And I took 9 months. And most people don't have that kind of luxury, of course, but it took me 9 months of research and putting together a 3-person team of researching the market, researching this, going, did we understand that? How is our go to market? And literally putting together a full, what you would call a Series A deck, if you guys know what that is, versus a pre seed funding. It was literally understanding and mapping because I had failed at marketing. I had failed at sales previously. I'd failed at operations. Like I failed so many times. I'm like, I'm not going to have all these problems again. So it was literally taking 6 to 9 months of doing the full thing, not just getting the product understood, but getting the entire company and business and go to market, everything else, not figured out to a certain level, but 60%, enough that you had your hands around it. That you're like, okay, I get it and what I'm going to need to do. And here's the challenges. So that was another thing. And then after that, I also knew because of so many failures and so many things I tried, I need to have a co founder. I understand this was my idea, but I need to have someone next to me who can be, how can I say, we have different skill sets, right? And we can collaborate very well, and we each have our domains because you know that those dark days, right, when your things aren't going well, hopefully the other person on that team who has as much invested as you, not just employee, but someone who has invested in you, invested in this idea as much as you, is going to pick you up. And the vice versa. When they're down, you're going to pick them up, and you can go through these really tough times because it's not going to be your investors, it's not going to be your family. You got to have somebody who's in this game with you. And so I had to go get a co-founder, and I got the first intern from iPod. I had a lunch with him, and he's like, "I'm in." And then it was like, okay. So he was my co-founder. He was literally the first. He was an intern at Apple that I heard, and then he ultimately was running a team at Apple, and I took him away. And then we just built the company. And we built it in 18 months with all the different things. But we had a good enough blueprint that we could march. But that was because of 20 years of experience and failure and everything to be able to really understand the pitfalls and understand funding and understand all these things.
Well, I'd love to dig a little deeper on that co-founder because a lot of us here as well, we have co-founders. Being a solo founder is a bit lonely, as you said, for when those dark days comes. But at the same time, if you pick the wrong co-founder, it can get you to in a whole
Oh,
different direction.
absolutely.
So how
Just
for
like for marriage or
so
anything
what?
else,
And
you need a
you,
good partner.
you now, as you said, you now are a mentor to so many founders. What is your advice to founders when it comes to picking their co-founders?
One, make sure you have compatible, skill sets. Make sure because the thing that I find with founders, especially first time founders, is that when things are going wrong, they go and focus on the things that they know how to do well instead of they're supposed to be focusing on the things they really suck at, which means they either have to go hire someone or they have to go and do that work. Most people retrench to the thing they know and they feel really good at, and then they kind of push that stuff away. So founders have to understand what they're really good at and what they're not good at and what they just don't like. And go find somebody who loves that stuff that you don't like, right? Steve Jobs and Tim Cook were exactly that. Steve could care less about logistics and operations and all this other. He just cared about product and marketing. That's all he cared about. And Tim, sorry, no good at any of that, as you could probably see now. So, anyways, so those two were an incredible combination that made Apple to where it was. And then it's continued on by operational efficiencies and everything else to get to the size it is today. But that's what you got to do is you got to pick somebody who's really, really compatible and does the things you hate to do, and they don't like to do the things you like to do, right? So you guys can have your domains and build from there. And then there's obviously all the other compatibilities of personality compatibilities, work ethic, trustability, all that stuff.
Let's speak on this fourth generation Tony Fadell. What is happening now? What is the next generation?
Oh, jeez. Time out. Time out. I'm just
Whatever,
getting
what,
through the tunnel.
whatever. As you said, there's these lily pods that you jump to, and you may have taken some certain time, but I think we're all really curious from you having these, incredible evolutions for yourself right now. As we said, the theme of this really weekend is about redefining success. How are you redefining your vision, your success, what you want to focus on? Because as you know, your time is the most valuable thing.
Yeah, for me, really, it has gone from, and I said this, earlier, which was, what is it I want, into what is it other people want, and how can I help them, right? But that was more of in a business and building context. Now it's more, and truth be told, and you guys know, as founders and builders, you kind of put a lot of the life stuff aside. You put a lot of the, you know, um, living life aside. Even though I had a lot of fun, it wasn't, always deep fun, right? Because you're always so focused. Your point of view, your waking day was all about this mission. Now it's about others' missions, and it's about really, family. It's really about kids, about relationships, partnership, growing as a person, because I've gone through so much failure from a personal side of things. There's a in a non-business context. I failed a lot of things personally when I was younger in a business context, and I learned how to be a better manager, a better leader, a better business builder, blah. But then, at the same time, you might be atrophying this whole social and emotional side of you in a non-business environment. And so I've been spending a lot of time focusing on that, and then also understanding, when you get to a certain point, not just the mentorship side, but understanding, once you've acquired things, we're trained throughout our entire life as how to acquire and how to build and grow things, and how to invest and, make more money. Well, what if you flip it? We talk about, we want to live forever, and everyone's like, never die, and or don't die. Guess what? We're all going to die. Sorry, we're all going to die. So guess what? You also, when you flip your brain to, I'm going to be a mentor, you should also flip to your brain of, what all these things that you've acquired, how are you going to die with none of them? Because what are you going to do? You're going to literally leave this big set to who? To your kids, who might be already 60 at that point, 70? They can't enjoy it. How do you go and flip all of these great things that you were able to amass and get them to the other generations who are living right now? So throughout Silicon Valley, and it's not being talked about, there's a bunch of people that that are really close friends, and it's very quiet. We actually have little talks about, how do we die with zero? Who do we give it to? Who do we give it away to? How do we and literally creating, just like you create a plan for how you build a business, how do you have what's your exit strategy for your life? We talk about exit strategy for business. What's your exit strategy for life when you don't have to worry about another investor, when your kids have more than they could possibly imagine when you give it to them? How do you make sure that those days that you still have energy on this planet, that you still have vital life force, not when you're 90 or 120 or whatever it is, when you don't die, but you don't live either. Um, you can't give it away, right? So how do you go and enjoy it with the people when they are healthy? Because the one thing, you could have a lot of money, but you don't have health and vitality. So a bunch of us are all talking about this. Again, it's very, very quiet, because it runs counter to everything. It runs counter to the VC community and everything else, because we have LPs and more and more and more, right? And the investments I have no LPs, because I didn't want any more bosses. But the things that I invest in now, it's going to take 10, 15, some cases 20 years to exit those things. I'm going to be, I hope not a crippled old man, but I'm going to be pretty damn old. Like, why invest anymore? Why invest in any more companies? It's going to take another 15 years, because it's not going to do any good for me. And all I'm going to do is be distracted by all of these things that are going to, take up my life force. So when do you flip the script of your life to be, instead of accumulating, giving back through all kinds of other ways? emotionally, socially, but also financially through and philanthropically. How do you do that? And there's a lot of people on these. And there's a book called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins, and a lot of people are reading that now and going, "Okay, how do I die with zero?" And then you literally make a plan of how to die with zero.
That's amazing. Last
You
question.
guys are all too young. I hope you all have that problem. And you can do it and you can do it literally in your 40s, and you don't have to have that much money. Just so you know.
um, my last question, if you're open also to audience questions as well, is the thing that I really want to ask you about is, we live in this reality that we really don't fully understand. I'm sure, as you said, as you've aged and matured and you've been able to literally physically change reality for billions of people on this planet. You literally
Ugh.
were, but but
For
it's
better or for worse.
yeah, for better. But at the same time, you're that those ideas came to you. You brought it to life. You co-created with others. However, I'm really curious your take on the reality itself. How do you see it? How do you play with it? Because it seems like you're playing with reality. Like you're really like, oh, I'm gonna put this in here and I create it.
Look at everything around us.
Yeah.
This whole resort, everything. You manifested and put this whole thing together. It just comes from one person's idea and energy and builds a thing. It's you it's amazing what you can do when you the last talk, right? It was exactly that. It's like, I want this thing to happen. And if you have the right mission, if you have the right way of discussing it and making sure everybody's part of this thing and it becomes bigger than you, that's what's beautiful. Now it also goes out of control and can become this other thing, but you can't be scared by that. You hope that the next generations will do what the right things is. The right thing should be to make sure it's beneficial to society, right? I didn't know social media and Bumble and all this shit's gonna happen when we make an iPhone. I don't know that. I just know that it was really weird when we had the first iPhones and our culture at Apple changed, right? But what you do is you're coming with the best intentions, and even today, when you know that you can have this kind of effect on populations, and especially a lot of people doing AI now, you have to understand that you need to be cognizant of what you're doing for society.
Mm.
So I remember very, very clearly when we were doing the iTunes music and video store back then, when it was only in the iPod. This was before the iPhone. And we all went in the room and we're like, what kind of media are we going to put on the iTunes store? Now today it's just called Apple Music, and Apple TV. But back then we were like, okay, obviously we're going to have music. And they were like, oh, well, we're going to have explicit music. Yeah, yeah, we're going to have explicit music. That's what you do. And then it was like, okay, now we're going to have videos. Okay, we're going to have lots of movies and TV shows. Great. And then it was like, oh, we're going to have R-rated movies. Yeah, we're going to have R-rated. We're going to have NC-17. Yeah, yeah. Well, then why don't we have porn? Why not porn? We make a lot of money selling porn. And Steve got up and goes, no fucking way. Is this the kind of values that we want to project to the families that we serve? Right? The families we serve, we are not going to put porn in the store. No way on hell. It's not going to happen because it's not beneficial for society on a whole, right? And if I look at a lot of the founders of other companies, and remember, Steve at this point was in his late 40s. But if I go back at this very same time, there was Zuckerberg, and there were, Larry and Sergey and all these guys, and they were all single, and they were making all these decisions. They had never had kids. They weren't married. It was like, these basically college kids going, I want everything and I want to do everything. And they don't have the brain. A lot of people, again, whoever has kids, you understand how your brain changes and how you see the world differently when you have kids. You're like, wait a second. It's not about me anymore. I'm responsible for the environment around these kids. And when you have that, you make your decisions in technology very, very differently than when you don't. And so what happens is we have a lot of these really young founders who created a lot of the world we have today without that understanding of what it means to have a family or to have a community that has to support raising kids in that. And I hope that these AI founders, a lot of them, Sam Altman doesn't have kids, okay? Understand what we're doing to the society when you understand what society really means and how it affected you, because now it's affecting your kids. And a lot of people and these founders don't have that. And that's what I always worry about. And so, when I create stuff, I do that when I'm working with founders. I bring that up and I said, hey guys, what are we doing about this? No, you can't do that. No, but they're doing it. I said, yes, but it's not. We're going to be able to have a very good market with these families, with these kinds of things. So we just have to remember that the things that we choose to do when we're shaping powerful technologies, they shape our societies, and we have to be cognizant of it. And I understand the easy money could be this way, porn, or the harder way is this way, but it's better for society. Take the other route. You just want to make sure that, like, you're doing the right thing and you're making good choices. And they're not easy choices, but you have the best intentions and have the best motivations and intent. Yeah, like I said, intent when you make these very big decisions.
Thank you so much, Tony.